Greetings and thank you for joining us for the 36th episode of DC Animation with Spencer and Friends. This is an LMG Podcast Production. Today, I'm joined by a dear friend.
Hello, it's Cassidy.
It's Cassidy with us yet again. And Cassidy, I'm happy to have you. The people should be aware of the DC that you consume and what you're into, what you like, because they are loyal listeners and they listened to the last episode that you were on, which was not very long ago. So we're looking at a sequel. Normally I don't have people this close together, but needed to have you on for this one because of the last episode that we talked about. And so, getting straight into it, thank you so much for joining us on this journey through DC animation. Today's film is Reign of the Supermen, released January 15th, 2019, and the comic book on which it was based is of the same name. I'm going to read a synopsis in my own words, and then we're just going to talk about it. And so, we open 6 months after the death of Superman. Cat Grant is interviewing G. Gordon Godfrey about the Supermen that have taken over in Superman's absence, and he's not a fan. We see 4 different Supermen before the title card. Lois is going through Clark's things, and the Kents come over to the house. Lois is still grieving, but after a discussion with them, she starts investigating. She meets with Diana to ask if the League has any information, but they do not. Over at the LexCorp Gala, Lois runs into John Henry Irons, and Lex reveals one of the Supermen, who, is actually Superboy, is, a LexCorp property. Lois sneaks away to gather information, but she is found by Dr. Donovan. She starts flirting with him to get information, and he reveals that Superboy is a clone just before Lex arrives to tell him to shut the fuck up. There's a ruckus upstairs, and Superboy is getting attacked by a Superman with a visor, Eradicator. He is there for Lex because Lex is a known criminal. Superboy gets back into the fight, and it's not looking good for him. Just as the Eradicator is about to deliver the finishing blow, the Superman with a hammer, Steel, shows up to stop him. But then Steel gets pretty easily handled. So Superman with a robotic face, Cyborg Superman, shows up, and they start fighting, which causes an explosion, and the Eradicator leaves. Over at the Fortress of Solitude, Superman's robots are using the Eradicator to revive Superman. That evening, Cyborg Superman goes to visit Lois, claiming that he's the real Superman and that she should use the paper to tell people that he is here to do good. Lex is pissed because Superboy is getting negative press while the other Supermen are getting positive press. The League is on protection detail for the President of the United States, and Superboy is there as well. Lex has it set up so that the president will recognize Superboy as the true Superman, assuming that everything goes well. During the president's speech, a boom tube opens and parademons start coming through, so, everybody starts throwing good hands. Cyborg Superman saves the president, but the boom tube falls and takes the League with them. Lex is furious because the news is calling Cyborg Superman the real Superman. Lex takes Superboy out back and he's about to put him down, but Dabney is there talking again, and Superboy learns that his DNA came from Superman and Lex Luthor. Donovan is able to convince Lex not to kill Superboy, and Lex kills Donovan using the previously failed clones. Cyborg Superman is visiting a grave when it is revealed that Cyborg Superman is under the control of Darkseid. Lois goes to Steel's hideout and gives him the information that she found out about Cyborg Superman with her trip to the cemetery. And they piece together that Cyborg Superman is actually Hank Henshaw. With the absence of the Justice League, Cyborg Superman announces at a conference that he is taking volunteers for a new cyber corps, which uses apocalyptic tech to enhance people. Steel goes to gather information from Intergang, but the Eradicator already cleared them out. Lois goes looking for Lex and finds Superboy, and they have, a nice little conversation. And Steel has tracked the tech to the Fortress of Solitude, where the Eradicator starts beating his ass. Lex pulls up the video feed so that they can watch what happens, and they realize that the Eradicator is a hologram protecting Superman. Superboy flies off to assist against Lex's direct orders. The League is in some unknown location fighting random creatures and unable to get back home. Superman wakes up and he and Steel kind of bring each other up to speed. Superboy also shows up and he's like, all right, what's the plan? Lex shows Lois the videos of Darkseid's plans through messages his satellites were able to collect. Lex calls and sees that Superman is in fact alive, and he tells Superman that Lois is in the Watchtower. Darkseid reveals that Doomsday was his weapon, and Lois is brought to Cyborg Superman, where she is almost killed by him, but the Watchtower sees Superman heading in. So Darkseid decides he's going to make a trip to Earth so that he can put his hands on Superman. The Cybercore is used to create a boom tube, and Darkseid begins his arrival. Lois uses Cyborg Superman's hate to get him to close the portal so that he can have Superman all to himself. Now he is in control of the Cybercorp, and Cyborg Superman orders them to destroy Metropolis. Superman runs into Cyborg Superman with his ship, and Steel and Superboy show up to hold off the Cybercore while Lex works on the Mother Box. Superman and Cyborg Superman begin their fight, and Superman is getting his ass beat. Cyborg Superman's whole plan for revenge is destroying Superman's good reputation, and uh, that is the revenge that he is taking out on him because he thinks that Superman should have saved his crew from Doomsday's arrival. Lex is able to use the Mother Box to bring the Justice League back, and Cyborg Superman launches the Watchtower into orbit. Lois is able to free herself and release the Sun Shield, which gives Superman his powers back, allowing him to defeat Cyborg Superman using a crystal with the Eradicator software. Martian Manhunter disguises himself as Superman to make the return of Clark Kent look legitimate, and Superboy goes to live with the Kents in Kansas. In the after credit scene, the League decides that they need to go handle Darkseid because he is not going to stop, and Lex wants to join too. And that's the movie. So Cassidy, what'd you think of the movie?
I had a really fun time with this one. I enjoy seeing a lot of characters come together. I think I've mentioned that in the other episodes you've had me on, just seeing different variations of how the Justice League can work together, but also I liked this because it brought in some characters that I was familiar with from Smallville as well. This particular movie encompasses about like two different episode arcs that happen in Smallville that are pretty significant. That being of Superboy and then Darkseid. So I was when Darkseid popped in, I was like, "Oh, I know who you are, bro. We don't like you. We don't care for you.
Yeah, you're a
um,
problem.
you're not a time that we want to have." Yeah. So I was excited to see that because a lot of at least the Darkseid plot line was a plot I was familiar with um from the series Smallville series personally.
Of course.
Yes. I also found some fun things while I was watching this. I wanted to like do some more research when I was watching this one. Um, and one particular moment kind of spurred it. So it's when they're in the newsroom, like assigning stories and stuff, and you see Perry goes like Sullivan. There's a very important character in Smallville named Chloe Sullivan, and I was like, there's no way, but that's an interesting name that he just threw out there. And I found out that like DC introduced that character officially into the comics as like so they took her from TV and put her in the comics. So it's presumed that I'm assuming that when he refers to her in the movie, I was like, oh, I bet that's Chloe. I know he doesn't say Chloe, he says Sullivan. It's Chloe Sullivan. So I thought that was something cool. And then there was another character that I wasn't familiar with this character, but her name sounded familiar to another character in the show, which would have been Mercy Graves. That Lex is just like, get in front
Yep.
of me. I was like, Lex, what the hell? um,
They have to remind you that Lex is a piece of shit.
that was like the biggest. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, because it's like, Lex, you didn't need to do that, but
No,
you have to be reminded that Lex, yeah.
constantly need to be reminded because I think we discussed this last time. There's sometimes that he's like, oh, is Lex being a little bit of a no, he is still just awful. But Mercy Graves, there's a character in Smallville named Tess Mercer that Oliver Queen refers to as Mercy. And I did some more research on that, and Tess Mercer is supposed to be kind of a composite character. So she's supposed to be like Mercy Graves, but she's also supposed to be like Lena Luthor. Like she's supposed to be like a bunch of
A bunch of people together.
important Lex characters.
A bunch of people like merged together.
Yeah, a bunch of important to Lex characters merged together. Because I was just like, that feels too coincidental because like she is referred to by Oliver constantly as Mercy. So I was just like, okay, it's gotta be the same. So I thought that was a cool thing that I'm glad I picked up on and looked into.
Okay. Okay. So, um, looking at a couple of those people, um, I know, or at least the most familiar I am with a couple of these people is from the Supergirl show on
Mhm.
the CW. So Supergirl is why I'm familiar with Lena, Lex's sister, and Lena ends up working with, or has working for her a young woman whose last name is Tessmacher, and
Yes.
yeah, and so I think yeah, that's why I'm familiar with her. And Mercy, I've always known as Lex's like right hand. Like Mercy is always right there with Lex. And I've seen situations where Mercy is cybernetic and protects Lex. But yeah, like I hear Miss Tessmacher in my head for
So
her.
interesting that you say that because that's the other character that she's composited with is Tess Walker. And in the plot line of Smallville, like Tess Mercer goes on to find like she when the actor for Lex Luthor leaves, she's kind of the one that gets brought in to kind of replace that air. Like she's the one that's in charge of the company and everything. And then you go on to find out that she's actually Lex Luthor's sister. So she's like all of these people, yeah, put together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes it yeah. So Smallville just literally compiled
It said all of you.
Mercy, Lena, and Tessmacher into one
Yes.
person. Okay.
Yes.
Alrighty.
Quite literally.
So we kind of talked about the voice cast last time, but we got some new people. So did you have any feelings about the voice cast in this?
I particularly Superboy with Cameron. Um we've discussed. I'm always a big fan when there's some like crossover
I
moments.
love it. I love it.
And
And
that's a good one for me.
so what do you know Cameron from?
Gotham.
Yep, that's correct.
Love him from Gotham. And so
Yeah.
I
That
went to
boy
look
was
at,
acting in Gotham.
oh yeah, he was phenomenal in that show and like fantastic. So that was the biggest oh well looky here because I feel like a lot of the cast was pulled over from the last film, but he was the
Yeah.
biggest new one. And I was just like, I know you. This is great. You are a DC person already in my mind, so it was really exciting to have him on it.
I so I had that for Steel. So Steel was voiced by live action Black Lightning
Ah,
in the CW universe.
okay.
And so whenever I heard him, I was like, is that is is that is that is that Jefferson?
Excuse
Okay.
right.
So yeah.
Right.
Um that was really great. But yeah, for the most part, everybody else was the same, or from the last movie, which this is a direct sequel, so
Right.
that makes sense. But yes, I really loved I mean, like I said, I love it when they pull people in from other DC. Like I love it when I see people in multiple DC places.
It's always so fun. It's my favorite little Easter egg to go find because I just know it's happening somewhere. I just need to go look for it.
Yep, I love it. It's one of my favorite things. So cool. So we open 6 months after, the death of Superman situation, like that whole thing.
Mhm.
Now, of course, you remember in the death of Superman what happened to Hank, right?
Right, because it was traumatic to watch
Yeah.
and to listen to even. I was just like, oh,
Yeah, it was rough.
okay. Yeah.
So, so we see G. Gordon Godfrey, and I I mean, we've seen G. Gordon Godfrey in a lot of things, but he's always anti-superhero, and he's like, that's his whole thing, is he's always speaking negatively about super people in general. Like he
He's
hates it.
like, I know him as a radio host that's very
Yeah.
public speaking out
Yeah,
against
like
them.
that's his thing, is that, yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
very familiar
um,
with him.
for people that are more familiar with Marvel, J. Jonah Jameson and how he hates Spider-Man, um, or even Senator Kelly and how he hates mutants. I mean, there are a few people who hate mutants, but yeah. So yeah, he's basically going over like, yeah, this is no, I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. And so we see the four different Supermen who are, kind of taking over while Superman is dead, presumably dead, because nobody ever really dies. And that's one of the things about this comic in particular. This comic book often gets blamed for the idea and concept that death doesn't matter, and that when people die, it because nobody stays dead. Like
Hmm.
everybody's always kind of still alive through some nonsense. I always make the joke, the only person who's really dead is Uncle Ben in Spider-Man. Like Uncle Ben's dead.
Yeah.
Like
Done.
he doesn't get a comeback, he doesn't get revived. No, he's dead.
Done.
But um yeah, this comic book is often blamed for death being irrelevant and death not mattering, because that's what happened here. Superman died and then he wasn't. And so yeah. And we see a lot of people die and then not be dead. I mean, there are countless examples of people dying and they're not actually dead. But I mean, we saw recently, and only recently because they did X-Men 97, but in X-Men 97, we see that Charles is not dead, even though in whenever the 90 series ended, it ended with Charles dying.
Yeah.
Um, and spoiler alert, even though that show's good and done by now. But
Some people
also,
out there haven't.
yeah, in that show, Magneto dies, and nope, he's not dead.
But I
Even
think that
go on.
that trope's caused like some issues and then like I won't believe someone's dead. I think I vividly remember having discussion with you after I watched the second Black Panther being convinced Angela Bassett was not dead.
Yeah,
I was like, there's no way.
yeah,
No,
no, she's not. She's not.
no. I was like waiting the entire film for her to just be like, hey, I'm back.
Yeah, and I will say, like, I know that in the first Black Panther we watched Killmonger die, but like it was confirmed that he's dead in
Mhm.
Black Panther 2 because he was in the spirit realm.
Yes.
Or yeah, whatever. Anyway, so these four Supermen. Let's start with Superboy. What do you know? Because you mentioned him in Smallville. So even like in or outside of Smallville, what is your relationship or experience with Superboy?
I knew of his existence. In Smallville, he never becomes actualized Superboy. He's just So he gets discovered by Tess, who I discussed earlier, at one of Lex's old labs, along with a bunch of failed clones, and come to realize like Lex was making these clones to help if he ever had injuries that he could just harvest from, kind of thing. That's where that origin came from. And the visual of who this was they called him Alexander, like they referred to him as if he was Lex, kind of thing. And he looked just like it. Like the actors they had play him were the actors that they had play young Lex. They even had in his teen version had a version or an actor that played Lex in a flashback like 4 seasons prior, had him come back to play the like young adult version of him, which I thought was a really cool thing on the show's part. But he was Lex. He had no memories, but then he started getting all of Lex's memories and was becoming this like really awful kind of person. And then suddenly he starts gaining these abilities and starts growing dark black hair and stuff like that, and starts turning into what I came to know as Connor. Um, because he was the facility situation that he was in, like the doctors referred to him as like a CNR, so they started calling him Connor. And that's when that kind of comes into fruition that, oh, like this is Clark's DNA too. Clark kind of takes him under his wing, and he starts to like Connor starts to lose like his Lex memories and everything, and starts becoming really fully embodying the Connor side of him. I don't know, like the Clark side of him, I guess. Um, and he, yeah, enrolls in Smallville High, and all that jazz. So it's kind of a very similar arc that happens within this film that I know is happening. Is like, oh, it's this clone that was originally very Luther-esque in the sense of like was with the Luthers and all of that, and then ended up being like, oh no, the Kent side of me is more of what I am and what I want to be, kind of thing. Um, so that's where my familiarity with that lies.
Okay. Okay. So I honestly wondered if Smallville was gonna do Connor since this Superman is so young. I didn't
Mhm.
know if it made sense to do because usually whenever we see Superboy, he's kind of young enough to be Superman's son as
Mhm.
far as like how he's presented. And the fact that he's a clone of him and all that, like he kind of is a little bit. And
Yeah.
so that's why I wasn't sure Smallville was gonna do
They
that.
definitely more refer to him as like Clark refers to him as like a brother, like he's like your brother. Like, and I think there might have been mention of like, you're kind of like my dad. And Clark's like, no, because at this point in Smallville too, Clark's like 24, 25. So he's like, I'm not your dad. Like,
Okay.
you are a 17-year-old, 18. I'm not your dad. Like, let's not. So that's more of how it's presented in the show in Smallville.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a familiar storyline. I actually did not know it was Superboy until later on. Like when I was originally watching the show, I was like, oh, it's just this clone kid thing, because I wasn't familiar enough with the existence of Superboy. Like I knew Superboy. I didn't know Connor was Superboy though, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
No, that does.
Yeah, I didn't
Okay.
know what his real name was. So I was just like, it's just Connor.
Yeah. So other than, the comic book, my main experience with Superboy is Young Justice, which is another animated show. So good. I love Young Justice. Young Justice starts with Superboy's origin. Like that's how it opens. Is we see the squad, kind of forming because they're all sidekicks under, a Justice League member. And they end up going to Cadmus and going to get Superboy. Like, and that wasn't their intent. Like, they just happened to come across him,
Mhm.
and the he of course finds out that he's made up of Superman's DNA as well as Lex's DNA, and that usually contributes to why he doesn't always have all of Superman's powers. So usually Superboy will be missing something that Superman can do. In the comic books, I feel like Superboy didn't have any of the eye stuff, so he didn't have X-ray vision, he didn't have heat vision, he didn't have any of that. In Young Justice, he couldn't fly, but he could, jump, and he had all the super strength and all of that. But yeah, so of course, Cadmus tried to clone Superman several times, and they failed. But they ended up with in the comic book, they ended up doing similar to what Smallville did in that they just made a clone of the director of Cadmus and then like injected him with Superman powers.
Hmm.
Um, and so he didn't get the full package, but he got some of it. And then in the newer version, yeah, he's half Superman's DNA and half Lex's DNA, and that is why he's usually missing some stuff. But yeah, so his origin stayed relatively consistent here.
It looks like it. That's interesting. Sometimes there's those little like, what the heck's going on in that little part of it, but that's interesting.
Yeah, and because these are based on the New 52, which kind of reset DC in 2011,
Hmm.
and some of those origins got, changed up a little bit from their original versions. And so, there's always 1,000 versions of people because sometimes these movies do their own thing and it's just like lightly based, but they change stuff up because this is not, I mean, like we just said, there were differences between what happened in the comic book and what happened here. And that applies to pretty much everyone here. And there are often subtle differences, but um had you heard of the Eradicator?
No, that I could recall.
Okay. Um, I don't know much about the Eradicator. I don't know, like the only time I had seen the Eradicator was in this comic book.
Okay.
So very unfamiliar with him. Um, I just know he was an AI that the Kryptonians created, pretty much. But yeah. What about Steel?
There, no. I even double checked to look to see if I was missing something, but there's not a Steel that I've been aware of that I've been introduced to in my Smallville world at least.
Okay. Okay. So there's a terrible 90s movie about Steel, that Shaq was in, but we're not gonna talk about that. So he was I mean, he, had a genius level intellect. He was brilliant, but he didn't grow up with money. So he used his size and all of that to like get a football scholarship so that he could get higher education in all of the things that he's skilled with. So let's just say robotics. He's skilled with a bunch of things, metal work. I don't know. Yeah, he's just very, very skilled. I should have probably you know tightened up my knowledge of him because it's been a while. But um he's working for a company, a weapons company, and they use his designs and start hurting people. So of course he's like, I don't like that. So he leaves and he starts a new life in construction. And one day he is saved by Superman, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're Superman!" And Superman is like, "Just do something useful with your life. Just be great." And that inspired him moving forward. So when Superman died, he became Steel. So that is kind of, I mean, that's pretty much his origin. He's named after the steel driving man, John Henry. I mean, and I'm sure that was painfully obvious. He uses the hammer and all that. But yeah, he's a large man.
Okay.
I think that he's billed at like 6'7",
Oh,
300. So like he's no small man. So he's strong on his own.
yeah.
And then also like he's are you familiar with Luke Cage?
Vaguely, yes.
Okay, so he like that's like when I see him, I almost see Luke Cage. Like
That makes sense. Yeah.
they have they're the same flavor
Right.
of person. But yeah.
He, if I may, I watched this twice, and there's a line between him and Superman that made me cackle both times. And it's just he when he makes the comment of just like, so this guy just thinks he can put on a cape and just throw on a suit and just do whatever he wants, and then it's like the slow pan down to Steele's own suit and Superman just being like,
And I'm glad that Superman just looked at him like,
like you're,
oh,
you're gonna talk about this. It made
and
me
then
laugh so hard both times.
he just kind of yada yada. He's like, oh, whatever.
It doesn't count when I do it.
Yeah, like we're not talking about me. So
I love that moment so
yeah,
much.
it was great. I agree. Like that was funny.
Good.
And then Cyborg Superman.
So no, there's not anything that I had known about that one.
Really, that feels like
Really.
something Smallville would have done.
I there's been like the closest thing that I could think of is the Bizarro situation that happened, but I know Bizarro is a very separate
Yeah,
entity.
yeah.
So
Bizarro's is his
I
own different
because
thing.
that was the first thing I thought of, and then I did some research and I'm like, oh, Bizarro's like way bigger than that. Like it's not the same thing. I just thought of Bizarro because in Smallville, the way when he's in the sun, he looks very steely and like kind of thing. So I thought that, but I even looked at Hank isn't even a Smallville kind of thing until there's like a continuation of Smallville called season 11 where they made a comic book situation after the show ended and Hank does appear in that, but that's nothing I ever read. So in the like none of that was anything I ever had seen.
Okay. And we kind of talked about Hank Henshaw in the last episode and how he appears in Supergirl versus really everywhere else.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that there there are two versions of Cyborg Superman. I've always known Cyborg Superman to be Hank Henshaw, but I feel like I saw that there was also a version of Cyborg Superman that is actually Kara's father,
Oh,
Jor-El's brother.
yeah, Sorrel. Sorrel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly who. Yeah, and so I've seen that, but that's not who this is.
I
But
wonder too if Smallville just never did anything with it because technically in Smallville, like the realization of Superman is not until
that's
the
probably
very
exactly why.
end. So
Yeah,
that's why it's probably not a character that was ever discussed.
that makes perfect. Yeah, now that you say that, like since he never was actually Superman, it wouldn't make sense to have a cyborg Superman.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. But also the fact that Darkseid showed up is
Yeah.
surprising. Uh, but anyway, so after we see those four, we see that Lois is going through Clark's things and she's not okay.
No.
Like she's still struggling, and that's when we see that Perry is going through the stories. Like, you, what are we doing?
Hmm.
And all of that, and the Kents come over and they're like, hey, we get it. If anybody gets it, it's definitely us. And they have a discussion, and she's like, you know what? Let me look into some things. So she meets with Diana, and that whole exchange was hilarious.
I loved that. That was a good
Because yeah, like firstly, Diana was like, "Hey, real quick, uh, Clark, Clark and I, we're just friends. We have a
just
special bond, but
yeah.
like, we're not what y'all were." And Lois is like, "That is not why I was here.
But now I'm gonna be thinking about it. Thank
Like,
you.
I didn't know that." She's like, "I don't see you as a rival." What? Excuse me?
Yep.
I would never. But so yeah, that was great. And then, Wonder Woman is basically like, I don't have any girlfriends. I don't know how to do this. This is weird and awkward. And Lois is like, yeah, it's fine. We'll figure it out. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like they kind of just are like, okay, let's be awkward together.
Exactly. Yes. I liked that
Because
dynamic a
yeah,
lot.
because whenever Diana was like, so you didn't come here to like cry and grieve? She was like, no.
No.
And Diana was
Right.
like, oh, thank God. I am so glad that's not why we're here. Because I can't.
No.
And yeah, that whole
What
thing,
a
it was,
dynamic duo, though.
yeah. Oh, it was great.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I loved it. And then they went ahead and paid homage to Wonder Woman's transformation.
Mhm.
That was great because I had not seen that used that I could think of recently.
Mhm.
And so yeah, like, and they even had the sound effect and everything. Like it was the same thing as the back in the day transformation. And also they kept canon that Wonder Woman loves ice cream. I don't know if we talked about this, but in the first movie, in this set of movies, Justice League War, Wonder Woman is introduced to ice cream and she loves it. And so I'm glad they kept that
Relatable.
canon.
Relatable. I wish I could have ice cream for the first time again because I probably would feel the same way as her.
Yeah, it was great. And I love like the comedy that comes with somebody from an older world discovering just regular things.
Yes.
Like whenever Thor is in the coffee shop.
Yes.
Yeah, like
Another.
that. Yeah, that kind of stuff, like hilarious. And that's what this was, because Wonder Woman like pulled up on the ice cream dude with her sword and was like, "I would like an ice cream for myself and my friend here." And dude is like, "You can put the sword away.
It's
Like,
fine. We can do that. It's
I'll
okay.
get you your ice cream." Like, so yeah, it was great. Unfortunately, Diana does not have any information. And then that evening, we get to the LexCorp gala, and Lois runs into John Henry Irons, who's like, "Hey, I'm happy to see you." And then Lex shows up, and Lex is basically like, "I just," or maybe this happens later, but Lex was like, "I just knew that you would rebound with me." And I was like, gross.
He's so cocky and has no right to be. Like, I was like, oh,
And that's the thing. It feels like they went out of their way again to remind you that he
yeah.
is a bag of dicks.
It somehow felt very out of place, but in the sense of like it wasn't out of place at all. Like I was just like, no, he would say that to her.
Yeah, his level of arrogance and hubris is high,
And
but
I
that's
just
a
I can't with this. I think we discussed this last time. I can't with this version of Lex. Like if the Lex, a lot of the Lexes I know, if had they said something like that, I would have been like, okay, that wasn't so slimy. But this one just when he says something like that, I was like,
well. And again, they
oh.
I think they do a great job of like being like, don't forget,
Yeah.
he's a piece of shit.
It's so good.
And they this movie keeps reminding you that
Yeah.
like because he does some good things in this movie, but
Yes.
they don't let you forget. Like, no, we hate him.
He's pretty awful. Ugh.
Yeah, he is terrible. But so he reveals, Superboy belongs to LexCorp. I know you've all been wondering and all that. So here he is. He works for us. And Superboy's out there, just having a good time,
Chilling, vibing.
being a young man, enjoying life and whatnot. And so Lois sneaks away to gather some information, and Donovan runs into her. And so she's like, let me flirt a little bit.
Your name. Yeah.
I'm sure I could get some information. Because yeah, he's like, not here. And then, just takes her to the lab and he starts reading off his resume.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a theme in this movie that he talks too much. And so, she's flirting with him and he's, basically trying to impress her. And he's already said too much before Lex arrives. And Lex is like, I really wish you would just shut the fuck up because you're talking way too much.
Mm-hmm.
Because when he's like a clone, like Lois was like a clone, and yeah, Lex was like, yes, a clone. Donovan, leave. You're
And Lex has,
talking too much.
yes, of course, a clone. What else? Yeah.
And so yeah, then I think that may be when Lex was like, so why didn't what you doing with him?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you'd you know come
I'm
over
right here.
here.
I'm
Yeah,
right
like what are
here.
you doing? And of course, John Henry Irons is listening in the background, and Lois sees him, but nobody else does, luckily. And so there's a ruckus upstairs, and they get up there, and Superboy is kind of getting beat up by the Eradicator.
A little bit.
And the Eradicator is like a broken Xbox. He don't play no games. He gets right to it. He is merciless. He he's a problem. He is a problem. And so
I thought we were gonna have a smushed Superboy. Like I
that's
was
what you're
like,
supposed to think.
oh, he's not gonna be here very long, is he? Like I thought he was just gonna get smashed.
That's what you were supposed to think. Because yeah, he was getting his ass beat. And uh so luckily, right, because he came for Lex and he was like, Lex, you're a known criminal. I'm here for you, which makes sense because that's how Superman feels. And Superboy luckily gets back into it, and the Eradicator again just beats his ass, and he got in a couple good licks, but that was whenever Lex was like, Mercy, thank you so much. For what? And then she just gets blasted.
Oh, yeah, just done.
And that was rough. And that's the thing. Again, sometimes Mercy is just a human, and sometimes Mercy is like a cybernetic protector of Lex.
Mhm.
And so I was hoping that this Mercy wasn't just a lady.
And she just was there.
I think she was just a lady. I think she was just a human woman who got sacrificed in the name of keeping Lex alive.
You know,
And so uh the Eradicator is about to finish off Superboy. Like you said, he was about to be flattened
pancake.
because the Eradicator went up so that he'd have momentum on his way down.
Hmm. I was
And
scared. I was
yeah,
like, oh.
he was flying, I think, at least at the speed of sound because all the windows shattered on his way down.
Mhm.
And luckily for him, Steel comes in and, intercepts, which is nice for just a second
Just a moment.
because then Steel learns very quickly, like, oh, you can't hang, buddy. You're, I understand that you got your little suit, you got your little hammer,
Hmm.
but you're, no, no,
Hmm.
no. And so he gets handled, and then Cyborg Superman shows up. So now we got all four of them in the same room. And Cyborg Superman and the Eradicator have a good fight. Like, they're throwing hands, and
Hmm.
it's a situation where, like, all right, we all need to leave because this is not good. And so, they kind of like blow out that first floor, and then the Eradicator leaves, and Superboy is being interviewed, and then everybody's like, oh, Cyborg Superman, the real hero. Let's go talk to him. So, yeah. And then we see over at the Fortress of Solitude, the robots are talking, and that's kind of when we learn that the Eradicator is being used to revive Superman
Hmm.
through the rejuvenation. And so that evening, Cyborg Superman goes to Lois's house and tries to convince her that he is actually Superman. And he's able to lean on the, I don't have all my memories, but I know that you're an important lady.
I know there was
And
something between us.
yeah, like
And
we were close or whatever.
right, so like, so sorry.
But yeah, so that's fine. And he's basically like, I want you to use the newspaper to let everybody know that I'm here to do good, which is kind of, a part of his plan because he figures if Lois, because Lois is the one who writes stories about Superman, and so I'm sure that he figured if I'm going to destroy his reputation, I can do it through the paper, but I must first convince everybody that I'm the real Superman so that it actually works. As far as ruining his reputation. So Lex is pissed because he's like, Superboy, you're off gallivanting and being social and whatnot, while these other three Supermans are actually getting the positive press that I have set aside for you. So we're gonna have to do a relaunch because this isn't working. We're gonna have to figure this out.
Rebranding.
Yes, we're gonna have to rebrand. So we have the League on a protection detail for the president, and Superboy is there too. And Lex is like, I have it set up where the president will announce you as the one and only, the one true Superman. This
Hmm.
is the rebrand. Don't fuck it up. And he's like, don't worry, I got it. And so, the press conference starts. The president is talking, and a boom tube opens, and parademons start just coming out of it.
Fabulous.
Um, And had you, I know that you said Darkseid was in Smallville. Were there parademons in Smallville?
That I don't remember, to be honest with you. That's not something I looked up on my own to see.
And that's okay. Um, we really saw parademons in Justice League War. That's when we really saw how that happens and all that. But the parademons are coming through, and so everybody starts, throwing hands, trying to keep everybody protected. And Cyborg Superman is kind of just like looking, like just watching, and Superboy's like, "Hey, can you
Can
throw
I do
some hands too? It'd be great if you could help." And he decides to instead save the president because the president is about to get taken, and he saves her, which works out cool. The boom tube falls out of the sky, and the Justice League, for whatever reason, they just all decided to group up right there.
I I know it's a movie, but I was like, all it just had to be
I
right
said the same thing. I
because
was
it
like,
happened. It happened when I first watched, and I was like, there's all of them? There's
all of them.
no way.
Yep. I was the same. I was
Uh,
like, so all of you just converged right here, just
all
for this to. Okay,
right.
cool, whatever. That's fine, I guess. The movie had to happen. So,
That's exactly it. Do it for the plot was literally all that was behind that moment.
yes. Yeah. So, Lex is furious because now Cyborg Superman is being recognized as the one true, the real Superman because um that is that's what happened. He saved the president. So, yeah, he's going to be recognized as the one true Superman. That was the whole point. And so after that, Lex takes Superboy down to basically says, "Wait for me right here," and takes him downstairs. And I said, takes him out back because he's about to get old Yellard.
Yep.
And of course, Dabney's down there, and he starts talking again,
Chit
and
chat.
he mentions your dad, and Superboy's like, what? And so Lex is like, no, no, tell him.
Go
You
ahead.
know,
We're already here.
yeah, we're here now. So no, go ahead and tell him. So he tells him like you are made up of Superman's DNA, but also you're made up of Lex's DNA. So you have two dads, which is better than none. And so Donovan is like, please don't put him down. He's the best one. He's the most successful. Like he's he's our best situation. Like don't put him down. Yeah, he's doing teenage nonsense, but we can work through that. And he doesn't actually say that, but yeah, he's like, this is the best attempt we've done. Like all other attempts have failed. He is as close as we've got. And Lex is like, you know what? You're right. That would be a bad business decision to get rid of him. But you are fired. And he opens up the little case, and the failed clones, I guess, eat Dabney off screen.
Yeah, that one. So I guess I did have a question. Is that who that is supposed to be? Like the failed clones? Because I
That was
wasn't
my understanding. Um,
okay.
and I don't know if they're the actual failed clones
Because they just
of Superman or
uh
if they're just other
things.
things that had been created. Because if you remember, in the last episode, we see Superboy kind of like escape, and we
Right.
see that like all the other tanks are empty and there are alarms going off, and like so it would probably. I mean, it may be safe to assume that those were not the failed clones because there wouldn't really have been a way for them to still be there, and
Right.
there'd be no reason for them to still be there. So they may have just been other things. But I mean, Dabney's been working this whole time, so who
Yeah.
knows what those were.
Right.
Superman's DNA may not be the only DNA they're working with, and I I assumed they are failed clones of something, but not necessarily failed clones of Superman.
Okay. That makes sense. I will say I did appreciate at the end, also did not appreciate how this part played out in the sense of I don't particularly love when I have to just listen to violence because my imagination is always a lot worse than what's probably happening, you know? And so I just the visuals I had in my head of this guy going out, I was like, oh, just hearing the scream. So I was like, 10 out of 10 on the
On the
writing and
sound
everything.
mixing.
Like, yeah, like don't show them. But man, the thoughts that came to my head, I was like, oh, okay, this is
Yeah, because he had a gun at least, and so he tried to save himself, but yeah, it did not. We know he's dead.
yeah.
But we see Cyborg Superman at a gravesite. He's at the cemetery. And that is when we see that Darkseid is running the show.
Mhm.
And it's like, oh no, it's Darkseid. Because again, from earlier movies, we know how much of a problem Darkseid is.
Mhm.
P.S. Darkseid is my favorite DC villain. I love Darkseid.
Okay.
Um, and that's the thing. I can't really explain why, because all of the other villains I love are for very different reasons than I love Darkseid. But yeah, I love Darkseid. He's too
Got him.
much. He's too much. And
Yes.
we see that we often see that he's too much. And
Hmm.
so, yeah. Um, so Lois goes to Steel's hideout. Steel, just got off work pretty much, and he,
Yeah.
lets his suit um go into all of its little sections and, all that, just kind of demonstrating how intuitive and all that his suit is and all that. And then Lois is like, "Hey, buddy, wondered when you'd be home."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Ah, oh no." And Lois says to him, "Is like, I'm really bad at figuring out
So
secret
bad.
identities. I'm terrible at it. So the
You
fact that I know who you are, that's probably not good."
subtlety, not his strong. He
And I
should.
was like, "That's funny
Yeah, that
because
was good.
she is a journalist and her job is to be observant, but yet whenever Superman was like, 'Look at me,'
Mhm.
and she was like, 'Oh shit,
Yeah.
it is you.
Oh. Yes.
I've been looking at you this whole time and couldn't see it.'" And so that it was just so funny that she was like, "Yeah, I'm terrible at this. So if I figured it out, that means everybody knows
Everybody.
because I am the worst person at this, and there is hard evidence of that." And so, they, kind of compare notes, and he basically, he's got, you know, a huge Batman style computer system with several monitors, and he's able to hack into stuff, and all the tech things, all the genius things that are always a part of this whole operation.
Hmm.
But yeah, they are like, "Oh, it's gotta be Hank Henshaw if he was at Terry Henshaw's grave." So, okay, cool, we figured it out. It's Hank Henshaw. Now, let's make moves. So, now that the Justice League is gone, Cyborg Superman, who's being endorsed by the president, says, "Hey, the Justice League is gone and I need help. So, if you want to volunteer, I will give you powers and you'll be a part of my cyber corps." And the first guy goes up there,
Freaking
volunteers,
Eric.
frickin' Eric.
Freaking Eric.
And yeah, he goes up there, volunteers, and he's like, "Babe, I can make such a difference."
Ah, freaking Eric.
Yeah, and so he goes up there, and then they see what he can do, and it's like, "Oh, okay, we're all gonna do that." That
Hmm.
feels like the move
I want to be cool. Yeah.
because and Steel and Lois, or John and Lois, are in the crowd, like, "What the hell?
Hmm.
What the hell is all this then?" Because they know that it's Hank Henshaw, and they're like, "This is gross. We have to do something." And so, Steel goes to gather information from Intergang, and his stories are often revolving around gangs and stuff. Um, so that's why he's like, "Yeah, I'll do that because I know some people I can, get info." And he arrives, and the Eradicator has already taken care of it. Like he's already handled because Intergang, again, we see in the earlier movie that Intergang is the group through whom all of the apocalyptic tech is being distributed.
Hmm.
And so, they've got it all over the streets, and their, alien tech is just what's happening. So, um, Lois goes to Lex and finds Superboy. And she's like, "Hey, buddy, you good?" And he's like, "I'm sad, but also I was terrible to you the first time we met, and so I wanted to apologize and tell you that I am not a piece of shit. But
Mhm.
I am a clone, and I come from Superman and Lex's DNA." And Lois was like, "You look like him." Superman, that is, not Lex, but Superman. And so they have a nice little talk, and they, kind of like each other as humans. Like they're just like, "I don't hate you. You're not a terrible person."
Mhm.
Or well, really, Lois comes to that realization because Superboy was ready. But anyway, um, so Steel is able to track the tech to the Fortress of Solitude, and he goes in there, and the robots are like, Cal is unavailable right now. He's still healing. May I take a message?" And then the Eradicator starts beating his ass because that's
Like,
the
no
Eradicator's job.
messages. We're just gonna get
Yeah.
rid of them.
Like the voicemail is full.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Eradicator just starts going in. And so uh he calls Lois, and there's just commotion in the background. And Lois is like, "You called me." He was
So
like,
happy.
I'm so sorry I butt dialed you in the middle of this fight."
Yeah.
And so then Lex walks in, and Lex again, "What's all this then?" And he just snatches the phone, and because he has the technology, he just pulls up the video feed from, I guess, Steele's suit.
Yes.
Because it's not like he's holding the phone in front of him,
No.
but it's from a first person view of Steele. So yeah, whatever, that's fine. And then the Eradicator like flashes, and then Lois is like, "Oh shit, he's a hologram. He's a hologram to protect Superman." And I'm like, holograms don't hit like that. And I'm glad that Steele was like, "You don't hit like a hologram."
Mhm.
I'm so glad he said it. And hologram, I don't think was the right word.
Yeah.
Like that's why I refer to him as an AI.
That
But
makes yeah.
yeah, but to call him a hologram, no, that is not. Holograms can't put hands on people
Oh.
or blast light beams out of their hands or whatever. And so Superboy is like, "Oh shit, he needs my help." And Lex is like, "You're not going anywhere." And then he's like, "You're not my boss." And Lex is like, "I
What's that? What's that little what
but
is it? What's it
but
say on your little
but you
outfit?
see, I am, because not only am I your creator and your father, I'm your employer.
Hmm.
So in all of the ways, I am in fact your boss."
Hmm.
And so he just rips off his little LexCorp sticker and flies off.
No,
And
Dad, I'm going on my own.
yeah, "I know what I'm doing, Dad."
Gosh, Dad.
And so, we see that the League is just fighting creatures, just trying to survive where they are. And Cyborg is like, "I promise I'm trying to get us out of here, but I can't."
Hmm.
And one of the things that I love that this group of movies does is they use the expertise of everyone in the room pretty much, because Cyborg is trying to boom tube them out of there, and Hal is like, "This is not a star system that I recognize." And like they're able to use their own expertise to piece together what's happening. We see that in previous movies in this same universe, and so I love that that is involved.
Proper teamwork usage, just like everybody can do what they need to do to get us out here. Like not just, oh, only this person can lead us out kind of thing. It's like, nope, you can do this. I know you can do this. It's yeah, good teamwork, visualization.
Yes, I love it. So Superman wakes up, and he and Steel, have a conversation, and they like kind of catch each other up on, the happenings that have been going on. And because they're both like, "Oh, I guess I didn't know everything that's been going on." And so Superboy is like, "Hey, I'm here too. What are we doing? What are we doing, guys? Because I want to help.
Hmm.
I'm here to help." So Lex shows Lois the videos of Darkseid's plan because he's been able to use his satellites to kind of capture everything, which is another like, oh,
Okay,
okay. Yeah,
Alex.
oh, okay.
Right.
All right, whatever. And so we see that I've this is before I knew the term gaslighting or like what gaslighting was, but
Mm,
like if I ever needed to give somebody an example of gaslighting, it is definitely the fact that Darkseid is the and Darkseid even says, I sent Doomsday to Earth and he destroyed your pitiful little ship. I found your lifeless body and I gave you purpose. And so the fact that under those circumstances, Hank is still like, it's Superman's fault. Fuck that guy.
mhm.
I was like, how did you reach that conclusion? Because of course we see in the first movie, he's like, Superman will save us.
So hopeful, so like for Superman, for everything. Yeah.
And that's because Superman has saved him, before. And so he just figures, Superman will save us again. But yeah, how he reached a point of this is Superman's fault. Like Superman is to blame. This is absolutely. I was like, is that the dark side mind control? Or because at first I was like, okay, dark side is still in your head. But then when dark side wasn't anymore, he turned the hate dial up, and we'll talk about it in a little bit.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, if I ever needed help understanding gaslighting, like this is the thing I was like, oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Like he absolutely made him like it was just like, oh, wow, okay. That was I was so confused. I was like, Hank, how did you get here?
That's that point,
Because
right?
in the comic book, it makes a little bit more sense because in the comic book, there's a solar flare that kills the crew.
Okay.
And Hank believes that Superman is the one who caused the solar flare. And so I see why you blame Superman for that. Because in the comic book, Hank is slow, like the solar flare caused a bunch of radiation. So it's very like random shit starts happening. And
Mhm.
Hank is kind of like starting to disappear from existence. And so he transfers his consciousness into a robot, and
Naturally.
he's trying to, save his wife from dying, but she ends up dying. And so he makes himself a Superman body and blames Superman and, vows revenge and all that. And so in that one, okay, I see why you think it's Superman's fault if you think he's the one who caused the solar flare.
Hmm.
But in this situation, I there's not really a way to blame Superman when the guy who did this is right there.
Front
Like he told you he did it. Like that's how he announced, because I didn't know in this movie. I because normally Doomsday is not a dark side creation.
you.
And so we find out that in this movie universe, Doomsday was created by Darkseid,
Hmm.
as opposed to the normal way that Doomsday normally exists.
Hmm.
And so, whenever I found that out, I was like, "Oh, Hank, why? How did we get here, Hank?"
Yeah. I didn't see it that way. I see it how you're getting it to that point. I saw it as very symbolic of other things in the world of just like you put so much faith into a being to control good and make sure good happens that them allowing bad to happen really puts you off of them. And not even allowing, but it's just like you were supposed to be there with if anything bad was supposed to happen or was going to happen, you were supposed to be there. And so that's why when Hank wasn't being controlled any longer, but was then got even more angry, it was just like Superman had failed him because all he knew Superman to do was be there to save, and then he couldn't do it. Although out of Superman's control, although like other things, but it was just one of those. But I didn't consider the gaslighting aspect of it all, that Darkseid probably intensified all of that so that even when he was no longer under control, it was just so ingrained in him at that point, that hatred, that didn't matter if it wasn't something Superman could control. It happened, and he could have been there if other things had worked out, and so therefore it's still his fault in Hank's mind.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about it whenever we get to that point.
Yeah.
But um Lex's satellites are, somehow able to collect all of this information,
See all the
which,
things.
yeah, whatever, that's fine.
Good thought.
Comic books. Um so uh Superman gets in his ship because he doesn't have all of his powers yet, and he starts heading toward, the fight. And, Steel and Superboy do the same thing. Like, they're all headed out. And I guess Eradicator is no longer able to do stuff at this point. But Lex calls and he sees that Superman is alive, and Lex is kind of like, I I'm happy to see you. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like it, but I'm actually really happy to see you, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for being here.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for not being dead.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate that, because we're gonna need you. And Lois and Lex have the conversation of, hey, one of us is gonna need to go distract Cyborg Superman while the other one gets this mother box going. And Lois is like, oh, well, where do I need to be for the mother box to, like, where do I need to stand for that? Because I know that, that's gonna be. And Lex is like, oh, you got me fucked up. You're going in there. I'm not
I'm
going
not
in there.
going there. I'm not going to be around him. Are you kidding?
Yeah, you got me confused with some goddamn body. If you think I'm going up, no, you're going up there. You saw what I did to Mercy. You knew I wasn't going up there.
Right.
So yeah, nah. I'll be down here working on the mother box. You go talk to the cyborg man. Yeah, you got it. I'm gonna let you ball out on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lois, I mean, getting up there was easy. Lois was like, you, take me to your boss. I need to have a word with him. And so, um, yeah, she takes she gets taken up to the watchtower, and whenever Lex calls and Superman is like, hey, I'm not happy to see you, Lex. Where's Lois?
Mm-hmm.
And Lex is like, oh, she's at the watchtower waiting for you. Yeah, she's at the watchtower right now. And Superman is like, oh shit. And so he punches it to the watchtower. And that is when we find out that Darkseid was his weapon. And Lois is brought to Cyborg Superman, and, he is, in full villain mode at this point. And he's like, I could tell by our interaction that y'all were close. So what better revenge is there than to kill you?
Naturally.
And so the Watchtower gets alerted that Superman is alive and on his way in, and Darkseid starts rubbing his hands together. It's like, ooh, I get to have the pleasure of killing him a second time. Let's fucking go. And Hank is like, no, he's mine. I hate him, and I'm gonna do it. And Darkseid is like, on that, we disagree. So, uh, everything down there is mine. Everything is under my control. So I'm gonna open up the spoon tube. I'm gonna go down there and I'm gonna put these paws on him because I want to do it with my hands. And so Darkseid uses all of the cybercore to open up a boom tube, and Darkseid is bringing the entire fleet. Like, Darkseid is coming down with everything because he's like, yeah, no, we're not playing games. I lost last time, and that will not happen a second time. And so he's about to come down with everything. And Cyborg Superman is like, oh shit. Or no, well, actually, Lois is like, hey, I thought that you were the one true hater. I thought that you hated him the most, and I thought Superman was yours.
Mhm.
What you doing letting this guy come over here? Which is a good thing Lois did that. Um Lois appealed to his ego and everything, but Lois also stopped Darkseid from arriving
Right.
because that's a big fucking deal.
Cool,
Darkseid Darkseid is a heavy hitter. It takes the entire league to deal with Darkseid. We see it, and yeah, he's too much. He's too much.
but
And so she's like, yeah, we can't have that. I would deal with Cyborg Superman every day of the week before I deal with Darkseid. I can't. So Darkseid needs to go back. And so she appeals to his hatred, and he's like, you know what? You're right. I hate him more than anyone, and I will have him for myself. And so he rips I guess, I assume the like mind
I hated
control
I hated that. I hated that so much. I don't know why,
because it
but
had blood on it, or
well,
it had a liquid.
and I think it's because of where it came out of him too. I was just like, oh, stop.
Yeah, like he pulled it like right
Right.
out of
Oh,
a temple.
and
Like
just
yeah,
dripping. I was like, oh, okay.
yeah, he just yeah reached into his temple,
Yeah.
pulled that thing out, and it
Yeah.
had liquid on it. And so again, like that felt like blood. And then he opened up his chest,
That didn't
and
bother me as much.
I'm
It
sure because that was completely cybernetic. But
was fine. I was like, all right.
yeah, the
But
thing in
yeah,
his head, it was like, oh,
I was like, I was fine until I was like, oh no, that was connected to his brain.
yep.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he pulls that out. He pulls his mother box out. And I guess I was a little confused because I was like, okay, so how are you still controlling the cyborg body
Mhm.
from Darkseid's house? And why hasn't Darkseid put you down
Mhm.
based on what you did? Like you were literally kneeling in front of Darkseid last time we saw your actual body.
Mhm.
So Darkseid should have dealt with you like right then. The moment you closed that boom tube, you should have got an Omega beam. You should have been out this thing. Like, but the movie had to happen
Plot.
because we just never that never gets addressed. That never gets handled because again the movie has to happen.
Yep.
And so now the Cybercore is under Cyborg Superman's control because he has ripped out the mother box and his little mind control piece. And he's like, and I've ordered them to destroy Metropolis because I hate Superman. And I will destroy everything that he loves and cares about because I hate him. And that's the thing. This is a level of hate that like there are only certain characters who hate this hard.
Mhm.
In DC, I would say that Eobard Thawne, which is Reverse Flash,
Mhm.
does hate the Flash at this level. I'd say a this is a similar level of hate that Timmy's dad has toward Dinkelberg in The Fairly Odd Parents.
Yeah.
Like he hates Dinkelberg. Like just says his name with disdain and hate in his heart. Like it's that kind of hate that we're looking at. And so like might even hate Superman the same way Frieza hates Saiyans. But yeah, so Superman uses his ship to run into Cyborg Superman. And, they start fighting a little bit. After, of course, Superman gets out and he's like, Lois, it's me. And Lois is like, what was your secret?
Yeah.
Because if that hadn't happened, I would have been like, what the fuck are we doing? But yeah, she went ahead and like, what was the secret?
Do this now. Tell me.
Yeah, I love you. And it was like, that's all. Okay,
All right.
it's you. It's really you.
Go save things. Yeah.
Because I needed to hear it. And I
Mhm.
need you to know that you were you. And so Steel and Superboy are outside trying to, hold off the Cybercore because they are destroying Metropolis. And Lex is out there working on the mother box and just running into issues. Like, it is not working. Like, he is not able to connect to the network. he is struggling. And, the movie's got to happen, so of course. But yeah, Superman and Cyborg Superman start fighting, and Superman is not himself. And so it is not going well for Superman.
Fine.
He is getting his ass beat. It is rough for him. And I don't know, they kept saying that he didn't have any powers
Mhm.
and that he was just a normal man, but he also did a
Yeah,
little bit.
like I don't know if that's more of the just like he didn't have powers, but still like Kryptonian in the sense of just like, okay, but he's still like stronger, but he's not like at r- super capacity. It was, yeah.
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 And
Enough to keep the movie going.
enough for the movie to happen. Yes, enough for the movie to happen. And so, because that's what it's about. It's about the movie happening.
Got it.
And so, um, Cyborg Superman's whole plan was to destroy his reputation because he figures I hate you, and you are the reason that my crew died because you weren't there. And it's not that you weren't there because you couldn't stop it. You were just too busy. You were just doing something else, and that's why you couldn't stop it. And so I blame you for my wife dying and my crew dying. It is all your fault. You should have been there. I trusted you. I believed in you. And you were not there for me. And because of that, my wife is dead. And that's your fault. And, obviously, Hank is a crazy man.
But
And we talked about him being gaslit by Darkseid, but I think that you were right. I think that this came down to his faith being destroyed because he had this trust and reliance that he felt like was betrayed, and for no good reason.
hmm
And so whenever you find out that your hero wasn't there for you. Like the way that that hit Hank, because he was like, I'm not worried at all. I have 100% faith that Superman will save us because he always does. And then he didn't? Yeah.
and that's like the whole issue with it is just like with superheroes in general that we see happening is just there's too much faith in acting like, are they gods among men? Yeah, but they're still not gods in the sense of just like there's just, yeah, that too much faith, you allow for that to happen, and then you have I don't know a better way of saying it, but no backup plan if something goes wrong and they aren't there for you, because that's just the reality of what it is. They aren't omnipresent. They
Yep.
can't be there.
And honestly, all of the detractors of superheroes, that's their whole point. That's Lex's whole
Yeah,
point. Is Lex is like, we need to be able to protect ourselves. Like we cannot rely on these aliens and all. Like we can't.
right.
We shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so that's Lex's whole philosophy. And so yeah, he is just hurt that his Lord and Savior didn't Lord and save.
Correct. Yep.
And so now he did a hard heel turn and he's like, I hate you and I'm going to destroy everything that you love. Because that's what it's going to have to be.
hmm
Like you destroyed everything that I love, and
So
so I'm going to destroy everything that you love. Because ruining your reputation is one thing, but killing Lois, that's going to hurt you even more.
oh yeah,
So
very,
we're going to do that.
yeah.
And so yeah, he is he's pissed that the arrival of Doomsday is like Superman didn't save him from that,
hmm
which again to me is wild. But Lex is able to get the mother box open because Lex is like, I need a power source, and then somebody just falls, and of course their little yeah, because the movie had to happen,
The movie had to happen.
and so somebody falls conveniently, their little spark, their mother box implant starts making noise, and he's like, "Oh, good, a power source has fallen into my lap. Let me just go ahead and get these jumper cables out."
Yep.
And then he attaches them to that guy's nipples, and he's able to get the mother box on. Cool. He gets the League back, and the League arrives, and they immediately start going to work. Like, I love that they landed, and Batman was like, "All right, spread out. Like, let's do this." And they had already been fighting. Who knows how long they have been trying to defend themselves from these creatures? And they were just like, that there's still shit to do.
Dedicated to their jobs.
Yeah, there's shit to do. Let's go.
Yep.
And so, yeah, they arrive, and they're like, "Hey, the League is here now, so we're saved." And Cyborg Superman's like, "It's gonna be really hard for them to reach us in orbit,"
Ooh.
and so launches the Watchtower into orbit. And it's an issue because Lois is about to get sucked out. I don't know how Superman is stopping himself from getting sucked out since he doesn't have his powers, but whatever. The movie's got to happen.
Gotta happen.
And so luckily Lois is able to get herself out and close the breach, and they make it to space. So cool. The fighting continues, but then Lois lowers the sun shield, and so the sunlight can come in, and we all know what sunlight means.
Strong Clark.
And honestly, this felt like the power of friendship. I'm gonna be honest. And this wasn't the first. The first time the power of friendship activated was when Clark woke up.
Yes.
Like, whenever the Eradicator was just beating Steel's ass, and then Clark was like, "Through the power of friendship,
Oh, no.
I'm gonna have to wake up so that my
Let me
AI
get in
doesn't
there.
kill this guy." And then through the power of friendship, uh Superman is able to get his powers back very immediately. And I'm like, if that's all he had to do, why didn't y'all just take him to the sun? But okay, whatever, robots, that's fine, because they weren't any closer to the sun than they would have been on Earth. I don't think.
I don't know.
But I guess it was nighttime or whatever. I don't know.
Okay, but like the robots, like you said, like why can't we just eat? Or guys, how to make this happen a lot quicker? Just get them out of the atmosphere real quick,
Yeah,
roast them. We're good.
yeah. If you just fly this rocket toward the sun,
No problem.
then it will heal him, and he will be fine. But, again, whatever.
Mhm.
It's okay. Maybe they didn't know that, but I feel like they did. Whatever, it's fine. And so, through the power of friendship, he gets his powers back and is able to defeat Cyborg Superman by busting him in the head with a crystal that, as far as I understood, had the Eradicator software in it. Like, that's how I understood that.
Okay.
Because it was a little confusing that he like busted him in the head with a crystal, and then we see Hank Henshaw in his own head at the cemetery, and then the Eradicator just kind of shows up.
Right.
But they earlier in the movie they talked about like, oh, a wild card might be what we need, and so that felt vague. But again, that's my understanding of how that happened. Did you gather something different, or were you
No, because
confused?
I had
Did
no
you
clue.
understand it?
No. I was like, oh, that makes more sense than I was just like, okay.
Yeah, because that's I'm not, because I saw him like break the crystal off
Yeah.
before they left and on all that, but yeah,
Which
like
I understand the crystals to have a lot of power based off of like my own knowledge of things. Like various crystals will do various things. You see that I've seen that in the movies, I've seen it in the show, da da da. But at least usually I'm told what it's gonna do.
yeah, and that's again
I
that's
was just
why
like, okay.
I think that's how I took it, just because he said we need a wild card. He broke the crystal off, and then whenever he did stick it in his head, we see the Eradicator, like so.
Yeah.
but also I don't know what that means. Like, I don't know if that means that the Eradicator is now going to take over the body. I don't know if that
Oh,
means that the Eradicator just like acted as a virus and shut him down. Like, I don't know.
no.
And so, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what happened. And so, after that, Martian Manhunter, we see the news where Martian Manhunter is Superman and uh Superman is Clark, and he's like, "Yeah, I found him."
Hmm.
So Clark is safe, and we're not the same guy because we're standing together right now. And they even like he even was a little taller,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I was like, okay, see that's how you do a secret identity right there. Like
I loved that.
you get a shapeshifter to have you in the same room.
Yep.
And then he was like, he doesn't sound anything like me. It was like, okay,
We
okay,
you don't need him to sound anything like you though. It's what you want, right? So it's
yeah,
like
it's
fine.
whatever. And so we also see that Superboy goes to live with the Kents, and he's going by Connor now.
Hmm.
And that's nice. That's wonderful.
Sweet.
So I like that. And in the after credit scene, we see that the League they get together and they're like, "Hey, this dark side problem, it's not going away. We're gonna have to go to his house and pick him up because he's not gonna stop." And I like that they included that because the fact that Darkseid did show up again and almost won the day again and all that, yeah, they were like, no, he's not slowing down. He's not. No, we are gonna have to go get him.
Hmm.
So I think let's go do that
Hmm.
because it's he's not gonna stop and we can't risk him trying to come back. So we gonna have to take this to his house. And Lex just shows up and was like, "I'm coming too.
Lex.
So when are we leaving?"
Lex.
And it's like, okay,
All
all right,
right.
Lex, whatever,
Yeah.
that's fine. But that's again Lex's hubris. Of course, yeah. He's like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm going.
Going. Why wouldn't I go? You
Yeah.
need me.
And that's the thing. Lex, he does some good things in this movie,
Yeah.
but because he provides Lois with a lot of information, he's the reason that the Justice League was able to come back.
Hmm.
But I mean, and he says these were all business decisions. These were all for me because I needed it too.
A lot of this Lex is very much like I can be mean to Clark, but no one else can be mean to Clark kind of thing, or to Superman. And that makes me laugh because but it's always like, but it's not me being nice. It's just like you said, it's business. It's
It's
fine. But
business.
I'm like, it's a very like a little brother situation kind of thing. And especially at the end when he's like, "Hey guys," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah. And
Please
that's the
stop.
thing. Like a lot of the times, what makes Lex and Batman very different is Lex's obsession with Superman.
Hmm.
Of course, also his hubris, his narcissism, his need for capitalism and all that. The fact that he's just an awful dude. But mainly, like his obsession with Superman is really the difference.
And I would agree with that across multi like all the media and stuff too would make the biggest difference because I think again the version of Lex that I know the most is very Batman-esque in the sense of like he's very smart, very rich, very capable, all of that stuff, but he just won't let go of these things about Clark and it's just like he lets that be his downfall almost. He's just so obsessed.
Yeah, it's the obsession that gets him almost every time. And so, Cassidy, scale of 1 to 10, what are you thinking?
Listen, there were a lot of a movie needs to happen moments.
A lot of that.
Arguably, too many a movie needs to happen moments. But I also had a really fun time despite what was that? What was that? Why was that? So this is a hard one on of like plot hole almost versus just enjoyment factor. Because I had a great time. I want to say like 8.5, like high. Like I enjoyed it because even the plot moments, I was just like, okay, like we're just here for the ride at this point.
Yep.
Um, but there were a lot of just like, why?
Yep. And that's
Which,
why for me, is it a good movie and did I like it are different questions usually.
yes,
Because
yes,
there are movies like, is it a good movie? Probably not. Did I like it? Yes.
yeah,
Had a great
yeah.
time. And so my rankings are not always, is it a good movie?
I'm
Um,
definitely going based off of I had a great time with
yeah,
this one.
good. And that's the
Easily.
thing, like if you get that, like sometimes that's all you can ask for
Mhm.
sometimes. But no, I agree. There was a lot of like, oh, okay,
Right.
the movie needed to
Sure.
happen.
I
But
guess we're doing that.
yeah, I get oh, okay. Oh, so we're
Okay,
just not gonna talk about that? Oh, okay. That's
cool.
cool.
Oh, it's a major plot point and we still don't know why. Okay, cool. Okay,
Whatever.
great.
That's okay. So, I'm going to give this a 7. Um, I enjoyed it. I had a good time.
Yeah,
But yeah, there were some like, what are we doing?
aping. Just there was either no need or okay, but why?
Uh-huh. And it was still a pretty good movie otherwise. And again, the fact that it exists in a larger universe definitely helps.
Mhm.
Um, the fact that it was animated and voiced very well.
Yes.
Um, yeah, like there were definitely some good things to point to. There were definitely some things that I like that they did, but yeah, can't get past those like, oh, okay.
I also, not to defend my score, but like there being plots that I was familiar with to an extent got me really excited as well. So I was just like, oh man, this is the best because I know what's about to like I know where this is happening and why this is happening kind of thing for sure.
And Cassidy, I definitely wanted to have you on this episode because I know that you are a Superman girly,
I am.
and I I wanted to see how you would feel about Superman in this capacity.
Hmm.
Like going through these things because of course in Smallville I imagine he didn't die because he was never Superman yet.
Right.
And so yeah, like for I wanted to see how you would feel about like seeing him die
Yeah.
and then seeing the aftermath of that, but then seeing that like he's not really dead
Hmm.
and seeing how you felt about that story wise like I wanted to see where you stood on this whole thing. And so I'm glad I had you for these two.
I was glad to be a part. I had a good time with it. It was good to see some different again, like you said, Clark never because it was always Clark, and I know I keep referring to him as Clark when I should be referring to him as Superman, but that's part of the problem of Smallville, not problem with Smallville, but he was never realized as Superman, so it's Clark.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just he obviously had some trials, but when there was any deaths that happened, it was never not Clark that ever died, and they were very those were real deaths, but it was never that Clark could die kind of thing. Because the other ones that died, those were humans, and so it's not fine, but it was like that's just what is going to
That's
happen.
what happens.
And oddly enough, though, even in Smallville, there weren't a lot of major deaths that happened. One of them did happen with Doomsday, but then even with even with even with Darkseid, not a lot of major things. And that's one I will say, I know comic book people don't love the Darkseid portrayal that happens in Smallville because Clark easily defeats him. But there's notes of it's because of the version of Darkseid. Like we weren't getting full Darkseid when it happened and everything. And it's a very important plot point in Smallville that helps the realization of Superman happening. But I just um never really understood that too of like the power of Darkseid kind of situation because in my mind I was like, yeah, Clark just
Yeah.
got rid of him. It's
He's just
fine.
another
Yeah.
monster to be defeated.
It's just another, which I will say, like he was the monster. Like that's Darkseid's what Smallville culminated with.
Okay.
So like he was the final, like the big thing, and it was a whole ordeal. But it's just I liked the acknowledgement here, obviously, of like Darkseid's not just something that just Clark can take care of.
No, Darkseid
No.
is like in all of the versions of Darkseid that we see, there's only one version of Darkseid that I truly hated, and that was in a movie that happened in an alternate universe, so it was fine because it was an alternate universe. But
Right.
any like main line Darkseid we see is a problem.
Yeah, and that's I think again, people very into the comics and stuff don't care for the Smallville situation, which I will say for that season 11 that I mentioned, that comic book series, like they make it very apparent that Darkseid's not gone. But in the actual TV show itself, the confinement of that, um, a version of Darkseid does get defeated. And people were like, little Clarky boy, like he's not even Superman and he just did that. So I liked seeing that bigger point. And I did like seeing I mean I watched films with like you obviously have like um some of the films have addressed Superman's death, but it hasn't been so much an on like a present thing for me. I mean, I know the more recent one, but this was something else and I liked it. It was a different not a plot point really necessarily that I've seen before because yeah, he was never Superman, so I never saw Superman die.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time with these.
Oh, I'm glad. Um, and you know, we there's again the catalog is large,
Mhm.
so there is plenty. Um, all right. In the next episode, we will be discussing Justice League versus the Fatal Five. So until then, salutations.